former communications director in the Senate and former TV guy and radio guy. And I will tell you, you will not see my opponent in an event like this. She is the only person who will not debate out of the 6 candidates who are running. So some of the things we've been talking about tonight, gosh, I wish I could talk to Ghazala Hashmi about that. But she refuses to stand on stage. And I think the reason has been exposed in this meeting tonight, because everything you have discussed, everything that is a problem, everything that parents dislike about Virginia's public schools, Senator Ghazala Hashmi has been the leader of pushing those agenda items. We are going to make sure she doesn't get a promotion to Lieutenant Governor of Virginia. I've been traveling, put almost 100,000 miles on the car in the last several months. Anybody, I need to go fund me for new tires because we're burning through them. I have been going to schools. I have been talking to parents. I have been talking to teachers who were scared to talk to me, right? Because they're worried they're going to get fired if they're talking to the Republican who's running for lieutenant governor. But there are so many people out there, you are not alone, who feel like things are off track. And they recognize that the system that was in place that you and I grew up with in the Virginia public schools, I went to Henrico County Public Schools. My dad was the principal of a big middle school in Chesterfield County, at the time one of the fastest growing counties in the state. The things that we experienced don't exist anymore. There's been a real corruption in the educational system where parents are being sidelined, secrets are being kept. There was a time where we all agreed, everybody, whether you were the Baptist minister down the street or the stripper, we all agreed we would protect the innocence of children as long as we possibly could. We would not expose them to sexual material, because we know that once that starts, it sends the person into a different realm. Once those eyes are open and those juices start flowing and everything is centered around that, the person begins to change. So you don't want to rush that. Where have we lost that protection of kids? Well, you've got to have strong leaders like Winsome, and I would assert like me, who will stand up and fight to make sure that you as the parent are the person who decides when your child is exposed to that type of material. And that the really pornographic material, and I did review it because I wanted to make sure as a former reporter that I wasn't just taking somebody else's word for it, that these graphic novels and books are not in the schools. With the internet out there, there's plenty of room for your kids to get in trouble. They don't need help in the public school system. And we're going to stop that from happening going forward. Let me finish with this. You know my story. I'm kind of a different candidate here. And I want to tell you, I'm sensitive about these subjects because of what I have been through in my life. And I always want to be respectful and thoughtful about the feelings of other people. Sincerely, I do. And I'm probably the person who holds back about passing judgment most of the time. I've seen this trans issue up close for 30 years. I'm 54 years old now. I've seen it for 30 years. And I've seen the devastation of individual lives. And it's not my place to tell an adult what to do with their life. And if you want my advice, I can give you some advice, but it's really not my place, certainly not as an elected official. But those of us who will lead at the state capitol have an obligation to protect kids. And I, as an individual, want to affirm, if you need to hear it, you are not a bigot for protecting your children. You are not a bigot for protecting your moms and their privacy. You are not a bigot for protecting your daughters so that they can compete in women's sports. And you are not a bigot for saying that boys belong in one restroom and one locker room and girls belong in another. That is a reasonable position for you to take. And if you have been thinking in your mind, I don't want to be called a bigot, let me assure you aren't, and we need you to be bold this election season and in the years going forward.
Beautiful. Thank you, sir. Delegate Phillip Scott. I represent parts of Spotsylvania and Orange. I'm not as popular as these two folks to my right. But did you know that something good came of Winsome's opponent getting into politics? Did you know that something good came of that? When she won in 2018, that's when I decided to get involved. And I ran for school board in 2019. I didn't win, but I stayed plugged in my local committee, and then God led me to run for House of Delegates. And so now I'm a champion for parents because of Winsome's opponent. And I've been waiting for the day to support an amazing candidate that will take her out. And so we have that with Winsome Sears. I'm looking forward to getting you across the finish line. I'll see that other candidates are good. We can do it. Beyond that, and most importantly, I'm a son of the living God. First and foremost, I'm a husband and a father of 5 beautiful daughters, one with a lot of medical complications. Puts me in a unique spot. I see what's going on in our schools, and I need to protect my children from it. In Spotsylvania County, there was a school bus aide who sexually molested disabled children, and just recently was convicted of, I think it was 13 felony counts. Yep. It's despicable. An immigrant, not that all immigrants are that way, but there was nothing on the books for a background check to be conducted to make sure. This is not the first time this person had done that. You don't just all of a sudden wake up one day and commit 13 different felony sexual assaults against minor children. And so I carried legislation this past year to tighten up the hiring practices. And Delegate Sam Rasool said, this is going nowhere. It's dead. It's dead in the water. Not willing to have a conversation. There were some issues with it. I worked with a few special interest groups. Ones that you'd actually be surprised. They were actually helping me with the legislation, but he would not let it go anywhere. That's what I'm up against in the House of Delegates. For 4 years, either I have carried or co-sponsored legislation to remove the pornographic materials from our libraries and have been part of that conversation. This past year, it was only focused on images, just images. And I provided the education subcommittee with examples of these images. And yes, my staff and I, we went through, as John Reid did, to make sure that we're not just going off of what we hear on the news, but we're speaking from firsthand experience. And we provided these images to all members of that subcommittee. And there was a gentleman from my district that showed up and he spoke. And he said, I wish the cameras were on you when you open that folder, because I wish they had caught the looks on your face when you saw what was in the schools. And what do you think happened to that legislation? It died. Did it go anywhere? Even though they were given the evidence face to face, they still refuse to protect our children. That's what I'm up against in Richmond. I will not stand down. I got to walk in, same time as John Reid, with the protest line out there, and we turned and waved, smiling, hi. That's what we're gonna get. But at the end of the day, the thing that's most important to me is that I do right by my Lord and Savior. I do right by my wife. She's almost as important. And then I set an example and I leave a legacy and make Virginia a place where I want my daughters to grow up and raise their own families.
So I'm Ian Pryor, Senior Counselor at America First Legal. About 5 years ago, I had no idea what was going on in the schools. Like, literally none. I thought everything was fine. Started to wake up a little bit. I ended up writing an article in the Federalist, I think it was actually 5 years ago this week, talking about Loudoun County Public Schools, where I live, specific to the academies of Loudoun and how they were changing the admissions standards, they were using equity, and they created this policy where if teachers criticized their equity policy, they could be disciplined, even if they did that outside of school hours. And I wrote an article about it, and actually the union in Loudoun County agreed, and that got taken off the docket the first time I ever went to go speak at a school board meeting. But a couple of months later, myself and some other people here who were from Loudoun found ourselves on the wrong end of this Facebook list, where they wanted to silence people that were going to school board meetings. They wanted to send mailers to their neighborhood, publicly expose them. And I thought, man, this is not good. This is bad kind of stuff. And so it really had the opposite effect, because what we did, we created an organization, Fight for Schools. We started a removal campaign for 6 of the school board members. We got to court with the first one in October, so 4 years ago this week. And we had a bunch of motions on it. Our attorney worked for the Dhillon Law Group. And the Dhillon Law Group, I think many know Harmeet Dhillon, who's currently the head of the Civil Rights Division of the Department of Justice. But she was not our attorney. We had her partner, David Warrington, who is currently White House Counsel. So we won all our motions, and it was clearly going our way, and ultimately the school board member resigned shortly thereafter. But during that time, I think we all became aware of a lot more that was going on in Loudoun County Public Schools, specifically policy AB 40, which is their gender expansive bathroom and locker room policy, which is everywhere. Right? It's not just in Northern Virginia, it's everywhere, but it is certainly in Northern Virginia. And, there was a sexual assault at a school. The superintendent lied about it at a school board meeting. And I think a lot of people in Loudoun County said, we don't want this school board anymore, and we don't want this superintendent anymore. And, well, the good news is we don't have that superintendent anymore, and we don't have that school board anymore. They're all gone, and the superintendent, well, he got fired after the special grand jury report after the investigation from Attorney General Miyares. But unfortunately, the fight would have to continue because these schools continue to propagate these policies. But there's a lot of talk about hope. Is there hope? And certainly, I think last November we realized that things are about to change. And in February of this year, America First Legal sent a letter to the Department of Education asking for investigations of Alexandria, Arlington, Fairfax, Loudoun, and Prince William for their violations of Title IX. And lo and behold, they opened an investigation, and they found that those schools' policies were in violation of Title IX. Now, Fairfax County and Arlington County, they challenged that in the Eastern District of Virginia Federal Court. They said, well, we don't want to lose our funding, so we're going to move for an injunction, and they sued the Department of Education. They lost at the Eastern District of Virginia, and then just yesterday, they lost at the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals. So, the tide is turning, and I would add, and I'll talk about this a little bit more, but at the United States Supreme Court, we've seen these issues start to percolate. Mahmoud versus MCPS this summer, great decision from the Supreme Court on parental rights.
Is Rosland still here? Or did she came over from Maryland? She's a plaintiff in that case, our chapter chair in that.
Right, a fantastic case, monumental case. And then Scarametti. Now, Scarametti had to do with hormones and puberty blockers, et cetera. Tennessee banned that for people under 18, and it reached the Supreme Court. What was interesting about that case, not just that Tennessee won, but you had 3 Supreme Court justices issue concurrences saying that, look, being transgender is not a protected class under the Equal Protection Clause. And then you've also had Justice Gorsuch signal that in a recent decision of the Supreme Court. So this summer, by June 30th at the latest, the Supreme Court is going to decide West Virginia versus B.P.J. That case has 2 questions. Does the Equal Protection Clause of the United States Constitution protect transgender status, and does Title IX protect transgender status? You already have 4 justices that are on record of saying no. And so what do Roberts say? What do Kavanaugh say? I predict that they're going to say it does not. And then all these policies are going to come crashing down. So needless to say, the wheels of justice turn slowly, and this has been going on now for about 10, 11 years through the legal system, but I think that we're going to start to see some real progress over the next year.
Thank you so much. And so the first panel, we laid out all the problems, and if you notice on this panel, we have state level, we have like the executive branch, we have the legislative branch, and I mean, you're not a judge, Ian, but you're kind of in the judicial area. Not yet, right? Not yet. You're not a judge yet. But it's through the, when you're suing people, what's the word I'm looking for here?
Judicial.
Yeah. You're like
Legal.
Yeah. I mean, there's many ways to eat this elephant, is what I'm trying to say. There's many ways to tackle this. And so I'm gonna go down the line. We're gonna ask you just one more question, and then we're gonna open it up to questions from the audience. And if you guys could be brief, because all of you like to talk lots. And
I was brief.
yes, you were the most brief.
I was not.
My question is, you listened to the first panelists, and you probably had thoughts as you were listening about your job, your position, or the positions that you're hoping to fulfill. What will you do, either with your current job or the positions you're hoping to fulfill, to start to tackle some of what those parents and community members are going through and their children are going through?
You want me to start?
Can you be brief?
Well, I'll just say that American First Legal actually has two cases right now, both in federal court, one involving Loudoun County Public Schools, one involving Fairfax County Public Schools. The Loudoun County Public Schools case has to do with these three boys that were in a locker room, and a girl, a biological girl that looks like a girl, acts like a girl, dresses like a girl, comes into the locker room, films them, and they're saying, well, why is there a girl in there? They investigate 3 of these boys under Title IX. They disciplined 2 of those boys under Title IX. The 2 boys they disciplined were Christian. The 1 boy that they didn't was Muslim. Same exact set of circumstances. So we brought a case in the Eastern District of Virginia. We were granted a temporary restraining order about 2 weeks ago. We'll be back arguing shortly on a permanent injunction as the case goes through the system. In Fairfax, we sued on behalf of a female student who went to go use a female restroom. A boy went into the bathroom, not a transgender boy, just a boy. And when she complained, they said, well, you're the one that's going to have to use the private restroom because of our policy. We brought that case in state court at a very different time. It was a year and a half ago, so we didn't want to be in federal court with the Title IX, but we recently voluntarily dismissed that in state court and just refiled it in federal court. So that's what American First Legal is doing on behalf of these students.
So lawfare, you'll continue to sue.
However we want to.
Yeah, it's great. No, I mean, it's time to go on the offense instead of waiting for all this to happen. Would you like to go next?
So I am actually a former vice president of the State Board of Education. And when I was there, we were concerned about the kids learning. Imagine that, very novel idea. We just want them to be able to have reading comprehension. We want them to be able to do math, science, and all of the other things that's necessary. That's it. That's all we want. We don't want political ideology. And so when we were on the school board, the State Board of Education, the test scores of the children were going up and up and up. Well, we rolled off and we had 2 since Democratic governors, and they changed the whole complexion of the school board, the State Board of Education, so that now we were talking about political ideology, and they said our children were learning when they weren't, and that they were passing the SOLs when they weren't, and we had places in various parts of Virginia where the children were all declared gifted, and half of them could not even pass the SOLs. They lowered the test scores and all of that. And so then we had COVID, and COVID did not close our schools. It was the governor's response to COVID that closed our schools. Remember that. Because so many other states did not shut down our schools. They did not shut down their schools. And so what we realized when we came into office, thank you very much for hiring us. Thank you very much for hiring Glenn Youngkin, myself, and Jason Miyares, and you brought in the House as well. And what we learned was really terrible, because Governor Youngkin immediately said every single school must now be open, every single one. And guess what happened? Yes, those who were democratically led, they sued. They sued. And by the way, my opponent, what did she say? Because, you know, she had something to say. She said the schools must remain closed for another semester and not reopen until September of 2022. And now I hear she's going around and saying, We are last in all of the schools with our children's learning. But of course, you were there. You said we shouldn't even open when we did. And of course we were last because we were the last to open. And our children were, of course, very low in testing. And so when I visited schools, I had principals say to me, normally the kids come to me 2 years behind. Now, because of the response to COVID, they're 3 and 4 years behind. What am I supposed to do? First of all, they should never have been socially promoted, before COVID, and now it got even worse. So what we have done, and what we're going to continue doing, is we are putting the scores of our children pegged to the NAEP scores, the National Assessment for Educational Proficiency. You can't lie anymore. If you can't pass the NAEP, then you can't pass at all. That's what we're doing, because there was an honesty gap. We were saying your kids were actually learning, but when they took the NAEP scores, which is, you can't fool it, they weren't passing. So that's number one. Number two, you are the child's parent every time, all the time. You are the child's first teacher. We're not, as the government, going to get in the way of that. And when we were gaslighted that there was no CRT being taught, well, as the kids say, we brought the receipts, because we know, especially in one school system, Loudoun County, they were paying over $300,000 for CRT training. So we're not going to have that. And, my friend, that you're talking about the opt-in, that's where we're going to be. You as the parent must be able to decide what your children should do. And I'm going to finish with this. My opponent voted against, what was going on in schools, because of the Parents' Rights Act. When she was in Congress, she voted against you knowing if the curriculum was being changed. She voted against you knowing that by the 3rd grade, whether your child was on grade level or not in all of the subjects. She voted against you knowing if your child was being transitioned. She voted against you knowing if violence was happening in the schools. Who is this woman to be telling us what we should do with our children? So we're not going to have that with me as your governor. That I'm telling you about will work for everybody's children. And finally, my opponent, as you probably know, voted that your girl children would have to be forced to share a locker room with boys and vice versa, and be in girls' sports, etc. And I just saw that schoolgirls in Albemarle County have started a petition on change.org that they themselves do not want to share a locker room with the boys. They don't want to be in the bathroom with the boys, because what they say is happening now is the boys are just coming into the bathrooms. They're just walking into the bathrooms and talking with them and opening the doors of the bathroom. We must protect everybody's children.
I'm going to keep doing what I've been doing. I'm going to introduce legislation to get pornography out of the libraries. I'm tired of the argument that we can trust our librarians to go through the books. I believe our librarians have plenty to do than sit there and go through the books. We should make sure that the ones that have pornography are not in our schools. It's simple. And then the librarians can do their job and help students do research, understand literature, understand how things are organized in the library, right? That's what a librarian is there to do. Teach and educate. We have systems in place, and we need to tighten those systems to make sure that pornography is not getting in the schools. I'm going to continue to submit that, and it's going to continue to die in the Senate, because the House is going to be Republican majority this November. I had a dream the other night that it was 52-48. Okay? Now, here's the charge. You get to decide if that's a 52 Republican majority or a 52 Democrat majority. Which way do you want it to go? Because there's something else that's on the table this year or next year, and that's the abortion constitutional amendment. And if you don't like what happened in Fairfax, where teenage girls were taken and gotten abortions without their parents being notified, that constitutional amendment will enshrine that in the Constitution and get rid of parental notification. I don't care where you stand on the abortion issue. I think everybody in the Commonwealth can agree that parents should know what their daughters are doing. As I said, I'm a father of 5 daughters. And if any one of them were at a spot where they were feeling they needed to make that decision, I would want to know so I could counsel them. And the other thing, without parental notification, it allows rapists and sex traffickers to take minors to get abortions over and over and over again. We need to be out there with that message. So is it going to be a 52 Republican majority or a 52 Democrat majority? It's in your court. Get your friends out to vote. Get out there, call, send text messages, make donations, and get out there after you've done your early voting. Take a friend every day to the polls, even if you think they're on the other side of the fence. Talk to them, coach them, and if you think they're not going to vote the right way, turn around, go home, and then try to go the next day. Okay?
I was wondering where you were going with that. I was like, really? I mean, we want them to, you want them to be engaged civically, but you want to drive them there?
Just they'll stuck in the car.
Got it.
And listen to you, and then if they, still not quite there, then try the next day. The next day.
All right, John.
Yeah, what you touched on is very important. I will never forget listening to Barack Obama, the candidate, talk about community organizing. I was like, what is this guy talking about? This is crazy. What is this community organizing? I was wrong. I was wrong. I was playing the old game, not the new game that was set up by the opposition. Barack Obama has set out a plan. People before him with rules for radicals set out a plan too about how you move an issue. And I will tell you, if I'm lieutenant governor, you are not going to have a passive person sitting there having cocktails in the afternoon and banging the gavel. You're going to have someone who is actively engaged in the legislation and communicating to the public of Virginia why we're taking the position we are. And I'm going to tell you a story about Winsome Sears real quick. You've heard me tell you this before. In Richmond, Virginia, my hometown, there was a horrible shooting at a high school graduation at the local theater downtown. It was bad, and we didn't know all the details. I'm on the radio talking about this story, and I find out that Winsome Sears gets in her own car without security, without permission, without fear, and goes and pushes her way through the crowd to the mayor of Richmond, who was reckless at the time, was a very reckless guy, and calls him and the prosecutor and the school system out for their bad behavior. And I remember watching it, Winsome, thinking, this woman's on fire. Thank God we got somebody who'll actually stand up and do something. You don't need more people who are just going to sit in their leather chair at the state capitol. We need people who will put on their boots and go out and fight on behalf of what is right. Winsome will do that, and I promise you, if you send me to the Capitol as Lieutenant Governor, that's what I'm going to do too.
All right, we're going to open up the floor for questions for anyone on